This is the big problem no one is talking about. Cheap dopamine is hijacking your brain. You're addicted to cheap dopamine and you don't even know it. Tell me if this sounds somewhat familiar. You're skipping your gym sessions because of your junk food cravings, like In-N-Out burgers and Costco pizza. You're trapped in the endless IG doom scrolling and mindlessly numbing yourself with city boys and Cantonese memes. Sounds like me. You're battling the 12 a.m. hub urges and spending hours browsing. Leaving your bed feels like the ultimate challenge. And you know you should be working, but it seems like it's almost difficult, almost painful to actually apply ourselves and just engage into meaningful work. The worst part, you're living with the guilt of knowing that you could be doing so much more. And this makes you sick to your stomach. So you tell yourself, there's something wrong with me. And you start looking for solutions. You start watching David Goggins' motivation montages on YouTube for some discipline and motivation. Dude, those are so corny, by the way. You're binging your top productivity tips by Ali Abdaal, just hoping to accomplish more. You order Atomic Habits by James Clear and 20 plus other personal development books under Amazon's recommended for you, and they're still untouched in their boxes, sitting in the corner of your room. No matter how hard you try, nothing is working. And if you're be very real with yourself, it's getting worse and worse by the day. You probably thought, I need more discipline, or I need to be more motivated, or I just need more willpower. But here's a newsflash. That's all a lie. You don't need any more productivities from Ali Abdaal. You don't need any more personal development books. You don't need any more generic motivation montages with scenes from The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith on YouTube. From the fast-paced Mr. Beast type of edits to the thrill buying crap that you don't need on Amazon, you're feeding the dopamine cycle while leaving yourself stuck in the same place. And personally, I've gone through this too. I would go to my friends for support, and my friends would say, stop thinking about it so much. It's not a big deal. Just enjoy your life. But they don't understand. They don't understand that you're secretly dying because deep down inside, you know, you have so much more potential. And you can't help but feel that there's something wrong with me. And eventually, despite knowing what to do, you're just trapped in the same spot. No matter what you try, you can't break the cycle, break away from the habits, building this ultimate deep resentment for yourself and disdain for yourself because you don't know what to do. And if you're anything like me, you start not trusting yourself anymore. This is the most dangerous place to be because this is where most people just give up. Real talk, the sad thing is I've had friends in entrepreneurship on this journey with me who gave up because they're in this dark place. And when you're in this place, maybe you start labeling yourself. Maybe you start saying, I'm lazy, I'm a failure, I'm depressed, I'm not meant for this. In a really, really dark twist of fate, these labels, they actually become self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the positive side, the truth that you definitely need to know if you're stuck here. The truth is, you're none of these things. This isn't your fault. And the real problem to everything, your addiction to cheap dopamine is silently killing your future. So if this hits home, just realize that you're not alone. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the deep costs of cheap dopamine addiction and how to actually break through, because I was here. And if you're like, hey, it's not that bad, let me talk about something really, really important. There's a hidden cost of cheap dopamine addiction. And just like you, I was actually really caught in this vicious cycle myself, not only once, but actually throughout my life. Through college, through pharmacy school, and even now as a entrepreneur or online business owner. I hate that word, by the way, entrepreneur. Ugh. So I actually turned 35 a few months ago. I had no birthday plans. I was completely by myself sitting in an In-N-Out. And I remember saying to myself, this is not the person I want to be at 35. I have all these skills. I know a lot, not to be arrogant, but I'm not the person that I really want to be. I'm not the person I truly respect. And I could be just doing so much better, but I feel like a freaking loser. This was me. I would lie in bed for 12 hours a day because I was too drained to do anything. And I didn't know why. I'd be doom scrolling and feeling the FOMO of watching my friends live their exciting lives on IG, going on vacations, getting married, popping out kids, but I felt like I was left out and behind everyone. I was really hooked on the hub and stuck in cycles of when I would wake up, get off, sleep, and repeat it 3 to 5 times per day. I would have these late night cravings for a 4x4 with a fry well from In-N-Out, or if it was really bad, I would get those dollar tacos from Jack in the Box. That's how you know you have it pretty bad. I also had a caffeine addiction where I would down whole bottles of vanilla chameleon cold brew concentrate. Delicious, by the way. I would feel constantly tired and irritable without my coffee fix. I would literally drop whatever I was doing, spend 7 minutes and just go to a coffee shop and just sip on this cold brew. I would browse into the late night, wait on, not always the hub, by the way, but I would scroll on Instagram and catch up on all the social media. I would wake up exhausted, missing even my 11 a.m. jujitsu classes. And I came to a point where I realized this isn't really me, because for me, I've always wanted to do better in life, even during this period, but I've always felt like I was failing. During this period of my life, I wasn't really hitting my financial targets. I didn't want to go back into the world of high ticket sales and all that and just keep on doing work that didn't feel fulfilling, or go back to pharmacy. And even from a health standpoint, I was stuck at the same weight despite dieting, and I wasn't accomplishing my life goals, like having a successful YouTube channel, of having 1.5 million, finding a life partner, and jiu-jitsu. Deep down inside, I always knew that I had to be doing something more. There was more for me out there that was unrealized, untapped. And here I was caught in this dopamine loop. And when I look back at these moments, the more I leaned on these quick dopamine hits, the harder it became to focus on my goals and stay disciplined. And I didn't want to feel like this anymore. And as I'm reflecting on this, I know it sounds like I'm a complete junkie at this point, but it's these moments where it's like death by 1,000 cuts that really hit home. Because even though I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of that sort of stuff, these habits were some of the hardest things I ever had to break away from and figure out. And I remember the worst part of everything was the guilt, because every single night I'd replay the same scenes about how I messed up my day, how I was such a failure, how I would let myself down over and over and over again. And I knew I had something more to give, but somehow I just couldn't bring it out into the world through my business, through a meaningful project. So after I left that In-N-Out, I decided that I had enough. I didn't want these just little bursts of happiness that came and went, just like my freaking ex-girlfriend who cheated on me. You, Nancy. At the end of the day, I just wanted real satisfaction, to just be proud of myself again, of my body, my mind, my abilities. And I wanted to make choices that were in alignment with my dreams and not out of fear or feeling pressured. It's kind of like that constipation, right? When you have the performance anxiety, sometimes you perform a lot worse because you're clenching, you're tight, you're not loose, you're not performing at your best. So I took a deep breath. What the is a deep breath? So I took a deep breath and I decided to fight the cheap dopamine that really took control of my life. Because at this point, I was sick of it. I was done feeling drained all the time from the hub. I wanted to just drop the extra weight, eat clean, start treating my body with the respect it deserves. I wanted to challenge the bigger projects, the ones that pushed me to tap into my full potential, serving the world, while also scaring the absolute out of me, which is a sign of growth, by the way. I was done with the yes habit or people pleasing that had me stuck on a never-ending revenue roller coaster in my business. And I was so sick of scrolling through the feeds and staying up late just watching memes and sending them to my friends. Really, I just want to be up at 5 a.m. just ready to take on the day, go to jiu-jitsu just like I used to. And I wanted to walk around with purpose, act with intention, and just make decisions that aligned with my truest desires, not my temporary urges in the moment. But most importantly, I just wanted to trust myself again, just to keep the promises I made to myself and just say goodbye to the guilt of knowing that I could do so much more. It doesn't have to be like this. There is a way out to self-respect, to motivation, to long-lasting satisfaction, and just being the person that you knew that you always could be. There's this YouTuber I follow. His name's Alex Becker. In the next 30 seconds, but he once said, "You're likely much stronger, smarter, and more capable than you give yourself credit for." And he's right. The good news is that once you understand this thing that I'm about to go over today, you can escape it. It no longer has a control over you. And if you want to be more productive, valuable, you got to start realizing and recognizing the enemy within, and that's cheap dopamine. And the crazy thing is, here's what happened when I cut back on all these dopamine hits. I dropped 10 pounds in 12 weeks by fasting and just switching to one meal a day. I got a SaaS, software as a service, for high ticket sales off the ground. I launched my creator mastermind, which is so exciting, and it's something I'm super proud of myself. I doubled my recurring affiliate payouts for this channel, going from $800 to $1,000 per month with just one affiliate. I made a few low ticket items for my business, like Notion templates, call reviews, and all that. I set up partnerships with startups and other software companies. And the crazy thing is I started attracting women in my life again, and a potential partner, no joke by the way. And because I'm a YouTuber, I built a content machine for my YouTube again, for my blog and my newsletter, something I was so inconsistent with. But the real game changer was I quit fighting with myself and started treating myself with a bit more kindness, understanding, growth, and above it all, accountability in my life. So I'm here to help share what helped me out of the trap. So let's dive in. Step 1, escape your environment. Joe Dispenza once said, to truly change is to think greater than your environment. You might not realize it, but you're on autopilot. You need to get away. We're programmed by our environment. The same environments trigger the same thoughts, feelings, and emotion whenever we come across them. We have routines, schedules, and patterns that trigger this autopilot. That's why, and I'm not speaking from personal experience at all, when you pass by a Jollibee, you get a whiff of that fried chicken, and before you know it, you're dying for that 3-piece chicken joy, that peach mango pie, and that pineapple quencher, even if you're on keto, which is definitely not keto, by the way. You get a DM notification on Instagram, and it pulls you into their freaking explore page for hours on end with ABGs, jujitsu memes, and Cantonese memes. Damn. You tell yourself, I'll just work out at home instead of hitting the gym. But then you end up binge watching Netflix all day. So imagine trying to change all these habits when your environment keeps triggering the same responses, because these reactions are wired in our brains. I'm not trying to say that you don't have willpower. This can be built over time. But if we're looking for a quick fix, we need to rewire our brain. The fastest way to break this cheap dopamine cycle is just to change your surroundings. You know, if you ever see people like go to these rehab centers, these fitness boot camps, and silence retreats, these actually work. But here's the tricky part about change. A lot of our relationships with change are often combative. We often fight it. Many of us think that we need to work harder, be more disciplined, or just have more willpower to change. But honestly, changing your environment doesn't have to be that tough or painful. So here are my favorite and painless ways to dude, why does it need to be so painful to just break free from the cheap dopamine? And these are all things that I regularly do, by the way. There's like Thai massage. There's 24 to 36 hour fast, if not longer. Some people do 7 days. You can try a new restaurant for lunch. You can explore a new bookstore. You can book an Airbnb in a new city, or go on a solo trip, or even get a hotel in the same city. My preference is by the beach, by the way. Just for a 1 to 2 day personal retreat, you can just try a new coffee shop across town. The point is to be very, very intentional about your choice. Rather than go your normal routine and repeat the normal stuff over and over again, it's important to just get out into a new environment. That way we're not triggered by these same environments over again. Just last weekend, for example, I actually went to a Thai massage place. Vegas has the best Thai massages, by the way. I tried a local Vietnamese banh spot on the other side of town, and I spent a solid 2 hours just browsing a used bookstore. And it felt so great. And from a scientific level, by doing this, we're actually switching the gears in our brain. We're calming down that reactive part in our brain, the amygdala, and firing up the creative, critical thinking part, the prefrontal cortex. So instead of just mindlessly reacting to our usual triggers, our usual environment, we get to just step back, we get to reflect and just focus on, what do I actually really want? Because how often do we ever do that? Like if you're like me in pharmacy, I was always busy. So the biggest thing is just to try something new, fun, and most importantly, low stress. You'll be surprised how a very simple change in your environment can actually lead to big changes in your behavior. But here's the problem. You're not gonna go every single day to a different hotel in your city and all that. This is all temporary. And what you realize is this mini getaway, there's an intention behind it. It's to actually get to a spot where you can spend a few hours just reflecting and noticing things in your life and just touching base with yourself. It's one of the most therapeutic things ever. And I always feel like so motivated after these retreats. The key is to end this mini getaway in a place where you can spend a few hours reflecting. I personally recommend the mountains, coffee or boba shop, the beach, maybe out into nature. But once we're in this mindset, we can actually move on to the next step for a longer term solution. Step 2, go on a figure out what the you want date. Sorry, I don't have a good name for this. When I say date, by the way, I'm not suggesting you to book a fancy candlelight dinner for table for one by yourself. That's kind of weird, although I do it by myself from time to time. This is kind of a different type of date. It's a more deep, soul-searching kind. Because how often do we ever take the time to intentionally ask, what do I want? How much of your life have you spent just striving for what others expect of you? Like parents, friends, Asian parents, Asian society. It's like we're trying to live up to some picture perfect image that isn't even ours, not even the things that we really, really want ourselves. And I get it. It's tempting because it's safe, it's predictable, it makes everyone around us happy, it's frictionless for the most part because you avoid conflict. But in this predictable cycle, we actually lose sight of what we truly want. And we start not trusting our intuition, which is probably one of the most important tools. So if you're anything like me and grew up in a competitive Asian community, I found that half this I was told, I didn't even want. That's crazy, right? And for me, I didn't care about the doctor title in front of my name. All it is really nice. I didn't care about flexing on others with luxury cars to impress others. I didn't care about spending 12 hours a day in a cubicle-like prison, aka a pharmacy. Fun fact, most pharmacies are in basements, like in the hospital. And chances are, as your brain starts actually settling down and calming down, you might recognize some of these experiences in your life. And I like to ask you, what are these things that you were told to want that you actually don't really give a crap about? And then we wonder why we're not motivated, because half these things aren't our goals. And dopamine is linked to desire, which we'll talk about more later. Have you ever considered that maybe our lack of motivation or our addiction to cheap dopamine isn't because we don't watch enough David Goggins videos, right? It's because maybe our goals don't stimulate long-term baseline dopamine within us. And this is where things get really, really super interesting. Because from a practical point of view, now you're at your place of reflection, and it's time to figure out what the that you actually want. Not what your mom wants, not what society wants, but what you want. You can thank the genius minds of people, my friends like Mike Kim, Vanessa Lau, and this book I read, The 12-Week Year, and the one thing for this. While you're at the spot, grab your favorite Notion board, your pen and paper, your Moleskine notebook, and just follow these steps. The first thing is write down your values. When we hear values, we're like, oh, like I think elementary school, core values, like a bunch of BS, or like the corporate BS politics that you had to deal with. At least I had to deal with. But in a real sense, values are really, really important because they help provide frameworks just to see if a goal or decision aligns with us. In simpler terms, it's like, what do you actually give a f about? Mike Kim and Vanessa, it really inspired some introspective questions that I found really, really helpful, especially when I was spending time with them. I like to ask, what breaks your heart? What do you feel like is total BS or pisses you off? What painful experiences have you actually gone through that you want to help others with or avoid completely? Something I always like to do. I'm old, so I'm 35. I come from the generation of like, there was no iPhones or anything like that. So we actually have these photo albums. I like to actually revisit old photos, even on my phone sometimes too. But I like to look at old photos just to find any reoccurring themes. And for me, looking at old photo albums just reminded me that I've always valued things like creativity. I've always valued things like making friends and relationships and lifelong learning, which is why I'm fascinated by the Japanese concept of kaizen, of continuous improvement or continuous learning. And when I was sitting with this, it took me a while, by the way. I make it sound like it happened super, super quick, but I think a month or two later, I realized like no creator deserves to die feeling like they're alone, that they have no friends. And every creator needs real friends that nurture their creativity to bring out their best work. This took me a long time to really put into words. And so don't worry about having something super polished or something super perfect. It's not going to happen. Or if it does, you're super lucky. This is the course of like a few months, even a few years in the making. Just write it down. That's the most important thing. The next step is to write down your 3-year vision. So just like core values and all that, we find them really, really cringy and corny because vision is kind of vague and feels very, very abstract sometimes, right? Like, you're supposed to just close your eyes and just imagine this new life. And it's difficult, especially when you're in a survival state, when you're always busy. It sounds really stupid, but this is so important for guiding us. So here's a more practical way of thinking about this. What does your perfect day look like 3 years from now? In my opinion, 3 years is perfect. It's enough time to make some major shifts in your life, but it's not so much that it feels unattainable. And I like to start in these 3 areas. There's health, wealth, and relationships. And I always ask myself is like, what do I want these to look like on my perfect day? By the way, there's no correct length for this, but how I imagine it, since I love YouTube, is like, I like to close my eyes. And I like to see the vlog of that perfect day, of that moment in your life. It kind of reminds me of the old Casey Neistat videos, but it should be in that much detail. And if you're feeling super ambitious, something I picked up from the 12-week year was you can consider things like family, personal growth, spiritual life, financial goals, physical fitness, and community, your friends, your people around you, organizations you're a part of. Next, set your 12-week mission. Now let's get very, very practical. Write down one SMART goal, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, the stuff that you learn in like school and corporate. Only thing I use, by the way. But you want to write down a SMART goal that you want to focus on in the next 12 weeks. Not 4 or 5, focus on 1. And not gonna lie, it took me a long time to actually do this because I'm always all over the place, back in the day at least. This requires discipline because you want to write down 10 goals at once. And so what I like to do is just pick the most important one to you, the one that feels like that would make everything so much easier. The other thing is 12 weeks might just seem like a very, very short period. But real talk, we often underestimate how much we can achieve in just a limited amount of time. And by concentrating all our effort on the right thing, we can accomplish more in 12 weeks than what most people do in an entire year. I think Dan Coe has a quote saying like, spending 1 hour on the right thing is better than spending a whole year on the wrong thing. Something like that. Sorry, Dan. And if you're having trouble kind of figuring out that one thing, something I learned from the One Thing book is like, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else is easier or just unnecessary? For example, right now, my goal as a YouTuber is to make 10K in monthly recurring revenue passively. It feeds my financial goals, my health goals, like things like meal prepping, training, biohacking, and relationships, wanting to take my friends out to experiences more. And the goal to just really tie this income to a cause that I actually really care about. Because in reality, money is not very motivating. It's the benefits of money, what we can get out of for exchange of money, that is way more important. So if you're anything like me, once you write these down, a part of you will probably be like, oh my God, I need this to be perfect. Whatever the that means, right? But remember, perfection isn't the goal. Continuous improvement is. This takes time. And here's another unpopular belief. Vision, mission, and values are essential, but it's not enough. What's the last part from holding us back? It's the cheap dopamine. What we were talking about the whole freaking time. And so step 3, once you have all these things kind of laid out, is to replace the cheap dopamine. So this whole video, I make it seem like dopamine is like the devil. It's the most worst thing in the world, but dopamine isn't the enemy. It's not evil. It's not out there trying to ruin your life. The problem is modern day society shortcuts our brain with cheap dopamine. And what is cheap dopamine scientifically? So when we spike our dopamine levels, or we're overdosing things like cocaine, amphetamines, porn, sex, alcohol, or caffeine, that's when we have a real problem. And by the way, Andrew Huberman is a great resource on this. And cheap dopamine, these are actually short-lived spikes in dopamine, which lasts a few minutes to an hour. Like anything, if something goes rapidly up, it crashes. And oftentimes they dip below our normal baseline levels. So that baseline motivation that we have when we do things like watch porn and it goes below, we suddenly feel very unmotivated. This unlocks the key to motivation because the higher our baseline, the more motivated and drive we intrinsically feel. And it's just like this short-term like sugar rush and the crash that you kind of face when you guzzle like a McDonald's 32-ounce soda, which is horrible for you, by the way. I haven't done that since like 7th grade. And the sad part is that the more you ride these dopamine roller coasters, the less thrilling the ride actually becomes. You don't get the same initial high as you first did the first time. Each high isn't as euphoric as the last, and the lows can actually dip below your regular dopamine baseline that we talked about. So the faster you peak, the faster you crash. And this is the problem that I was alluding to before, because most people say dopamine is a feel-good chemical or neurotransmitter, but in reality, it's really responsible for desire and drive. And when you're operating below baseline, that's when the lack of motivation and feelings of things like depression hit. And I was actually doing this to myself every single night, 3 to 5 times a day when I was addicted to the hub. And this actually shapes our mindset and our perception of optimism, pessimism about our chances of success with our goals. This is why some of our friends are like fired up like Tony Robbins 24/7, while others are just really depressed. And I've been on both ends, to be honest with you. And like I said, all this is tied to our cheap dopamine habits. So what's the fix? The key is replacing cheap dopamine with long-lasting alternatives that just increase our baseline of dopamine. Andrew Huberman, the science goat, he recommends cold showers and ice plunges for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, getting 20 minutes of sunlight per day, going on regular walks, exercise and regular movement, good sleep, yoga nidra, game changer for me personally, by the way, healthy nutrition, supplements like L-tyrosine, and if you want to go the prescription route, ironically as a pharmacist, I probably wouldn't recommend these, but there's drugs like Ritalin, Adderall, modafinil. But how did I make the transition? For me, I went cold turkey. I told myself that I wouldn't do these things anymore. And it's a lot easier said than done, but I got to a point where I told myself just to reject all these degenerate habits because I was just coping. Instead, I started zeroing in on practices like sticking to a boring at-home diet, turning off all my notifications and setting my devices on airplane mode, especially when I was like working or doing a YouTube video like this. Daily intense training, so jujitsu and powerlifting are my favorite. Doing 2-hour blocks for deep focus sessions. Doing 30-minute walks every 2 hours during the middle of those breaks. Practicing yoga nidra and meditation. Staying away from like Mr. Beast videos and shorts, and started consuming more long-form podcast type of styles, kind of like this. I started prioritizing a full 8 hours of sleep and just waking up alarm-free. And not gonna lie, I'll be very real with you. It was boring as hell. But I think that's the point, because we're so used to the high activity. We need something. We're addicted to our phones all the time, right? I think it's important to remember it's temporary. It only takes 30 days to start reaping the benefits of this. At a point, it's not about ditching bad habits, but it's also disrupting the environmental triggers that drag us back to them. And that's the beauty of going through something like monk mode. My friends always make fun of me because I literally don't have any hair. It's not about swearing off these things forever. It's about looking out for our well-being in the here and now during this select period of time. And part of this is noticing how you feel in your patterns, because when you know you have an urge for the hub because you're feeling very lonely, or binging on junk food because you're stressed the out at work, we're able to step back and we're able to see the cues that kind of trigger these responses. We're able to reassess and just really see how we can replace those quick dopamine habits with longer term, more fulfilling things. I know this sounds really corny, by the way, but something I always tell myself when I'm in the throes of all this is it's not about loving yourself, it's about respecting yourself, and your future self will thank you for it. But ultimately though, it's easy to put this in theory, but a lot of people will make this mistake. Don't make the mistake of being perfect. There's this quote I really love by Dr. Nicole LePera. Most people don't notice how much they've grown, because perfection isn't the aim. It's progress. Something I continuously forget is that I'm human. I'm not a machine, although I wish AI could suddenly make that part of my life way easier. So if you relapse, just realize it's not the end of the world. You're actually expected to relapse, and you're supposed to relapse because it takes time to undo all the years of cheap dopamine addiction. How long have we been addicted to the hub, to our phones, to crappy junk food? So even with the occasional relapses, right, we're still achieving fewer dopamine spikes than before. It's all these small changes, the tweaks, the iterations, the reflections that really will help us master this long-term dopamine game. And something I like to think about, and that I wrote during one of these walks actually that I went on, is that optimization comes from iterations, not perfection. But after spending a few weeks in just my own company by myself in these extended times, even as an extrovert, by the way, I noticed that The drive and direction that I had in my 20s was making a real big comeback in my life in my 30s. I had the confidence to do more ambitious goals, ones that scared the fuck out of me. I wasn't so all over the place emotionally, and you can actually check my IG posts for proof, by the way. I wasn't chasing the temporary happiness in life anymore, but really striving for the deeper long-term fulfillment. I would carry a new kind of self-respect for myself, my skills, and what I do. And I started asking deeper questions about my potential. Like, real talk, I had this real moment where I was asking myself questions like, what if I've been wasting my 10x skills on 2x games this whole entire time? What if concepts like hard or easy, these subjective concepts, right, didn't exist and stuff just needed to get done? What if I stopped setting goals based off what I thought was possible and instead focused on setting goals based off my potential, ones that maximized it? And what would it look like if I prioritized my self-respect over things like self-love and temporary happiness? And what if I started choosing to see the potential in myself that others have been seeing in me all along? I talk a lot about masculinity and femininity with my friends, and I think for a long time I was just really in my feminine energy. But by embracing that masculine energy of drive, it just didn't only change my life, it revolutionized it, and it still is. So I'm kind of curious, what are some of your cheap dopamine triggers? And if you're vibing with this content and you want more videos on running a online creator business, lifestyle design, and self-actualization and unlocking your true potential, sign up for my newsletter. And while you're at it, check out this other video that the algorithm cooked up for you. Stay compassionate, stay authentic, stay rebellious. Peace. Whoosh.